hit the record. Thank you. And this session, as all of our sessions are, will be available on YouTube on our ANJAC channel. So look for @ANJAC Views on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel. There are more than 100 sessions available for you to learn everything from whatever you needed to know about wind energy to climate change, to site plan application review, flooding, stormwater, and a whole lot more. So please join us at our YouTube channel. After both of our presentations this evening, we will have Q&A. We ask you to use the Q&A option, and we will go ahead and answer your questions live after both sessions, or after both speakers. And if we don't get to your question, or you have a question about something completely different than tonight's topic, please do feel free to email us at info@anjac.org. That email is heavily monitored, and we get the request to the appropriate staff member to respond to you. That's info@anjac.org. So again, welcome to our third session in our spring climate mini-series. This is our second climate mini-series that we have had in about 8 months' time. And so all of these sessions are recorded and are on our YouTube channel. If you have questions or want to know more about climate change in New Jersey, how it is affecting us, and how the extremes of our weather are becoming more extreme, we're seeing more fires and more drought, we're seeing more flooding, and the data tells us that we can expect more of that to happen. There are sessions available for you. I would encourage you to check out the Arctic meltdown and why it matters, as well as climate change impacts on acidification and sea level rise. If you want to know about wind energy projects and whales, if you want to know about wind energy projects and birds, we have sessions for you available on YouTube where we brought the experts in to talk about those particular topics. In tonight's Q&A, we're really going to work to be focused on getting project updates from Orsted and Atlantic Shores Wind. So we're really pleased that we have representatives from both of those companies here with us this evening to give us project updates and to answer your questions. So that said, most of you know ANJAC very well. ANJAC is a nonprofit organization. We are 54 years old, and we've been working for more than half a century to help municipal officials, primarily environmental commissioners, but also green team members, open space committee members, and elected officials on making good decisions about the environment for their community. We do this by engaging in diverse and inclusive practices and really working to establish a more equitable New Jersey. We appreciate your membership. We have approximately 300 environmental commissions throughout the state of New Jersey, the vast majority of which are members of ANJAC. And so if you don't know if you're a member, you can again email us at info@anjac.org, and you can check out the member benefits at anjac.org/membership. So thank you for being members of ANJAC. We are also interested in hearing from you because our primary service and our primary role is to be there for you on the issues that you're concerned about for your healthy community and your local environment. So you can go ahead and use the camera app on your phone and take a screenshot of that QR code, and it'll bring you to a survey. We want to know what's important to you and what you want from us. So help us serve you better by filling out this very brief survey, and then we will align our programming and our services to do the best that we can to meet your needs. And if you find this program useful this evening and you have found our programs useful in the past, we appreciate your individual support. We can't do programming like this without your support. We can't bring the resources to you free of charge or at cost without the support from our community. So help us help you. And if you're interested in receiving our quarterly magazine, the ANJAC Report, with in-depth stories and articles about what's happening in Trenton, as well as inspiring stories of environmental commission projects throughout the state, then we ask you to consider a donation if you are able. So thank you again for all of your support. And keep in touch. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, because that's where we're at mostly these days. So with that, I want to move into the prime time and introduce Catherine Perry of Orsted and Megan Hayes of Atlantic Shores. and welcome them and thank them for sharing their time with us this evening. We have members of both of their teams also with us who will be around to help answer project-specific questions as we move on with the program. We're going to start with Catherine and Orsted, and after she's finished, we'll move on to Megan and talk about Atlantic Shores Wind Project. So Catherine Perry is the permit manager for Orsted's Ocean Wind 1 project, located 15 miles off the coast of Atlantic City. Catherine brings 15 years of experience in the environmental field, marrying a passion for natural resource conservation with a professional focus on permitting large energy infrastructure. Catherine holds a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources from UMass Amherst and a Master's of Environmental Science and Management from the University of Rhode Island. Catherine held various roles in nonprofit and government organizations, as well as in private consulting, before joining Orsted in 2020. A born and raised New Jerseyan, Catherine lives in South Orange with her husband and 2 young children. So Catherine, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we ask you to share your screen. I'm going to turn off my screen just to minimize distractions, and I see most everyone already has, so I'm going to just fade into the background and turn it over to you. And we need you to come off mute as well after you share your screen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Quickly confirm you guys can see a screen that says update on the Ocean Wind 1 project. Wonderful.
We've got it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen, and thanks to Anjak and all the folks on the line here tonight for taking a couple hours to learn a little bit more about the Ocean Wind 1 project. So just a quick run through of what we're going to be talking about here tonight. Let me just make sure I can advance my slides. We're going to step through a brief project overview. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the Ocean Wind 1 project, I'll talk a little bit about the project routes that make up the Ocean Wind 1 project. I'll spend some time talking about the regulatory processes that govern the work we're doing at Ocean Wind 1. And then I'll transition into a little bit of information about the project itself, the wind turbines that we propose to use for the project, as well as the natural resources that are found within our project area, and the monitoring, minimization, and mitigation measures that we are implementing as part of project development. Finally, I'm going to spend some time looking at a handful of visualizations that the project has prepared from a number of key observation points located along the coast within the project area. So, in brief, the Ocean Wind 1 project is located between 15 and 27 miles off the coast of southern New Jersey. We're located in this dark blue box here within the screen. And we received an award by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities back in 2019, and the project will provide roughly 1,100 megawatts of green energy. That's enough to power roughly 500,000 homes. As the project works through the remaining major regulatory steps, we're also gearing up for construction. It's a really exciting phase of the project. So pending receipt of all of our final permits, authorizations, and approvals that are needed, we will begin onshore construction in the third quarter of this year. Next year, we'll begin our offshore construction works starting in the second quarter. And we do expect to begin producing power at the end of next year in 2024, the beginning of 2025. We've got a link here to some additional information about the project. You can go to www.oceanwind1.com to learn a little bit more about the project itself. So diving in closer to the Ocean Wind 1 project, we're going to take a look at sort of the primary components that we're developing. So down here, zooming into this blue bordered box, we're going to be developing and installing 98 wind turbines. The wind farm will also include 3 offshore substations, and those are noted in these blue bolded dots. To bring the power onshore, we'll be installing 3 export offshore cables buried in 2 cable corridors. The northern northern 2 cables are referred to as the Oyster Creek route, and the southern cables are referred to as the BL England route. The Oyster Creek route to the north will make landfall first, crossing Island Beach State Park. It'll then go back down, crossing the waters of Barnegat Bay before ultimately making landfall in Lacey Township. Turning onshore, I'll note that we will be tying into 2 points in the existing power grid. So we'll be developing 2 separate onshore substations. The Oyster Creek routes will tie into the power grid that was located adjacent to the former Oyster Creek nuclear generating station. And the BL England power cables will tie into the grid where there was once the BL England coal-fired generating station, also retired. We did develop the routes to make use of existing and disturbed roadways and or paths wherever possible. And just to note that once we are onshore, the cables will also be buried with the exception of these very short overhead sections, which will tie in the new substation to the existing power grid. So looking at something on the sort of at the longest around 250 feet to tie the onshore. Sorry, this is the Oyster Creek substation to the Oyster Creek grid at the Lanoka station up here. I'm going to now flip over to the major regulatory processes that really govern how offshore wind is developed in the United States. So this first graphic here depicts the roughly 10-year process that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, undertakes as part of the review of offshore wind projects that are located on the outer continental shelf. So at this stage, BOEM is nearing the end of their environmental technical review process, which I've highlighted here in this big blue circle. This is occurring under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. On the next slide, we'll look a little bit more closely at that process. But really, the goal here was to sort of inform the significant amount of work that's already occurred and has been undertaken as part of BOEM in identifying and citing the project. So zooming in here to that NEPA process, about a month ago, BOEM published the final environmental impact statement for the project. It was published on May 22nd. In that final environmental impact statement, or FEIS as it's referred to, the BOEM analyzed potential impacts to physical, biological, socioeconomic, and cultural resources that could result from the construction, operation, and maintenance, and potential and eventual decommissioning of the Ocean Wind 1 project. So based on the analysis that's included in the FEIS, BOEM will ultimately make a determination in its record of decision whether to approve with modification, or disapprove the Ocean Wind 1's proposed construction of the project. That determination is expected to come forth on July 7th in the record of decision. In the event that BOEM approves or approves with modification our proposed project, we'll be looking for approval of our construction and operations plan, or our COP, which really is just our application to the Bureau in September of this year. So in addition to the review being undertaken by BOEM in that NEPA process, we're also required to obtain a number of other major permits and approvals. So I'm just going to touch on a couple here that are pretty significant to the project. So the first being our state permits that we were required to obtain from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. We received those permit approvals in April of this year, as well as our federal consistency determination. Later this year, we will be looking for permit decisions on our U.S. Army Corps of Engineer permits, as well as on our NOAA Marine Fisheries, or NIMS, incidental take regulation, which will be published under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Those both are under review right now and anticipated in October. As always, additional information there's a wealth of additional information that you can find online. The Permitting Council's dashboard provides updates on all the federal major milestones that are being worked towards as part of the project on the dashboard. And we can provide links, certainly, Jen, to ANJAC for if folks are interested in looking at the permitting dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to turn away from the wonky regulatory process now and provide some additional specifics on the project that we're building. So the Ocean Wind 1 project has selected GE's Haliade X turbine. It's a roughly 900-foot offshore wind turbine. The lower blade tip elevation will be roughly 70 feet above the water line. This is a nice little pictogram of the Haliade here. We get asked a lot of questions with respect to the offshore turbines on how we intend to light them. So we are required to provide lighting on the top of each structure in accordance with federal regulations for aircraft warning and detection. In order to minimize the visual impacts during nighttime of the lighting in the wind farm, we do intend to install an ADLS system. That's an aircraft detection lighting system. Essentially, the system will activate aircraft warning lights only when the aircraft is in the vicinity of the wind farm. We expect that through implementation of that ADLS system, that the wind farms will only be lit for sort of the cumulative of a couple of hours over the course of a given year. So this is really going to significantly reduce any lighting in the offshore space once we are in operations. We will also provide navigation safety lighting on all the turbines. These are lights that'll be on the monopile structure itself and visible at a range of 5 nautical miles for mariners, folks transiting in and out of the wind farm. So intended to not be visible from the shore. Okay, I'm going to flip into a discussion now of natural resources in the context of the project. So with respect to wetlands, as I said before, we have done our best to site the project and previously disturbed roadways to the best of our abilities. There will be some temporary wetland impacts on our Oyster Creek route. Those are associated with areas in our landfall. Where we do have impacts associated with those export cables, we intend to restore whatever we possibly can. We're in the process of developing a restoration plan now, seeking to replant native species. Where we can't avoid any permanent impacts, like in areas where we'll have manhole covers, we will be mitigating those in accordance with our state permit and Army Corps permit conditions. In Barnegat Bay, we understand that we have healthy submerged aquatic vegetation beds in certain portions of our project area. As a result, we've undertaken a pretty significant effort to relocate our Barnegat Bay cable route to an area within the bay that was previously disturbed in an effort to minimize those impacts. We will be conducting significant monitoring efforts throughout construction and post-construction. We're looking at a 10-year monitoring campaign that researchers from Stockton University will be executing to track any impacts that we have during construction and operations. And as like we are with wetlands and any other unavoidable impacts, we'll be mitigating for those in accordance with all of the permitting requirements. I know Jen mentioned that you've had a session already on birds and offshore wind. So I'll just give you a brief status update on where our project is. So we have prepared a bird and bat post-construction monitoring framework that really looks to understand and track any potential impacts that operations of the wind farm will have on birds and bats in the lease area. So the study design is currently being developed by our team. We'll submit the full study design to BOEM and the Fish and Wildlife Service prior to commencement of offshore construction for their review and approval. Really, the objectives we're focusing on are understanding what our impacts possibly will be, validating the risk assessments that we've prepared for offshore bird species. Going to be looking to fill information gaps wherever they exist. We know that there certainly are a number of information gaps with respect to birds' usage of the offshore space. And we have a number of potential monitoring methods that we're developing right now. So we plan to implement acoustic monitoring for bats and nocturnally migrating birds within our lease area. We'll be undertaking radio telemetry for Endangered Species Act listed birds, including the placement of receivers within the lease area and upgrading onshore MODIS receiving stations. And we'll also be undertaking tracking studies for marine birds to understand how marine birds either avoid the wind farm or are potentially attracted to the wind farm. And the relationship between the turbine operational status and, again, avoidance and attraction of those marine birds to the wind farm. And finally, we're working on a compensatory mitigation project, a suite of projects for impacts on red knots, piping plover, and roseate tern as required by BOEM and Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as a compensatory mitigation plan to support migratory bird habitat for critical wildlife within New Jersey. And again, I understand you guys have spoken a bit about marine mammals and offshore wind. I'll just give a brief update on the primary avoidance and minimization measures that we are implementing during construction of the project to ensure that the development of Ocean Wind 1 minimizes any impact on these species once we're under construction. So first and foremost, all of our vessels operating in the offshore space will be working under a strict vessel strike avoidance set of measures and procedures. That includes significant training to ensure that vessel captains and crews are adhering to mandated speed restrictions to avoid any potential for vessel collisions. We will have onboard species observers throughout all transiting events during construction. And our vessels will be required to adhere to separation distances that we know are effective in reducing the risk of collision. We'll also be using animal monitoring technologies and databases to ensure that when we are operating offshore, if any given vessel within the wind farm identifies a species, that information is then disseminated throughout all working vessels, as well as to other vessels that are potentially operating in the vicinity. During pile driving itself, which is one of the portions of offshore construction that has the potential for underwater noise impacts on marine mammals and sea turtles, we'll be implementing a number of pretty strict minimization measures to reduce any potential impacts on those animals. So first and foremost, we'll be adhering to time of year restrictions. So no pile driving between January and April to avoid peak migration seasons for marine mammals. We will have a suite of protected species observers that will be on watch, looking for any marine mammals during all of our pile driving operations. And we'll also be using the latest advanced technology for mitigation and monitoring, using, all the tools that we have at our disposal to ensure that our PSOs can see as far as they can, and ensure that whales and sea turtles, other protected species, are not entering our clearance zones during pile driving. And those clearance zones are the areas where noise can be generated with an effect on the animals. And finally, we'll be using at least 2 noise attenuation devices. So these are devices that will reduce the transmission of underwater noise. This could look like a double bubble curtain or a single bubble curtain and a hydro sound dampener. We're working actively with our contractors to identify the best set of solutions that will help reduce noise as much as we can underwater. And finally, we'll be installing a long-term passive acoustic monitoring program. So we'll be installing buoys to track noise, or to track the movements of animals in and around the wind farm, pre-pile driving, during construction, and then post-construction as well. Okay. Quick minute here. We have a pretty significant fisheries and benthic monitoring program that we kicked off about a year ago. We have started a suite of offshore sampling techniques that's being undertaken by both Rutgers and Monmouth universities. They're looking at understanding the presence of fish using the offshore wind project areas in the pre-construction phase, during construction, and post-construction as well. Using the various sampling techniques that are really tried and true by the industry and existing researchers working in this space, as well as some novel techniques. So we have started using eDNA sampling, which includes, taking just a couple of vials of water to understand what animals have been present within a 24-hour period, and pairing those sample results with traditional extractive methods of fishery sampling. We're also about to kick off a benthic habitat monitoring program, looking at the substrate in the pre-construction phase, again, monitoring during construction as well as post-construction as well, to see what changes are happening as a result of the project construction. And finally, that submerged aquatic vegetation monitoring plan that we'll be executing for a period of roughly 10 years to track any changes to the submerged aquatic vegetation within Barnegat Bay that could potentially result from our project. Okay, so I'm going to flip now to a series of visualizations. So I'll flip onto that. So we're going to start from the northernmost key observation point that we prepared a visualization for the Ocean Wind 1 project. So this first visualization is taken from the Barnegat Lighthouse. The distance that's being viewed in this simulation is approximately 38.64 miles away, and the photography was taken at 11:34 in the morning. So understandably, it's a bit challenging to see the turbines on the horizon here. This is, if you're looking on a computer, please don't zoom in. The intent is for you to look at the screen roughly 20 inches away. And this is representative of what you should be able to see from the Barnegat Lighthouse under these exact sort of set of circumstances once the Ocean Wind 1 wind farm is constructed. The next visualization is taken from Playground Pier in Atlantic City. This key observation point actually represents the closest point that our project will be to shore. So at this location, we're 15.21 miles from the nearest turbine. And the time of day this visualization was taken was 12:28 in the afternoon. I'll give folks just a minute to look at that. I realize I'm coming up on my 25 minutes. I got 2 more to go.
You're good
Okay.
on timing. Don't worry about it.
Thanks, Jen. Looking here now at the visualization taken from the Stone Harbor Beach. So in this one, you'll see a couple of different things. So we're getting farther away again from the nearest turbine. So at this vantage point, we're 20.93 miles away from the wind farm. The time of day is 4:22. So there's a lot to be said about how the time of day, atmospheric conditions, and location along the shore really influence what you're going to be able to see on any given day. So again, we're looking at clearer conditions and a later time of day that shows you the sort of imagery that you can see on the horizon here. And the last one that I wanted to end with is now the southernmost key observation point that we prepared a visualization for the Ocean Wind 1 project. This is taken from the platform at the Cape May Lighthouse. So what we've done is included an inset map to that shows a 4 times magnification of the project. So in this little image here on the top, we're looking at roughly this area right here in the larger visualization. And you can see the turbines on the horizon. Because of the curvature of the earth, really you're seeing the tip of the blades and less so the monopile structure foundations themselves. But it is just to sort of provide the context that the turbines are in fact in the background of the visualization, but you do need that magnification in order to see those from this vantage point. In this visualization, the nearest turbine is 33.88 miles away, and the time of day is 2:03 p.m. I can provide, we've done a number of visualizations, so 28 in all. So that means we've done renderings depicting the project and what it will look like from 28 different key observation points spanning from that Barnegat Lighthouse all the way down to the Cape May Lighthouse along the Jersey Shore. We've got in our visual impact assessment all of these visualizations as well as the existing imagery that we start off with. So a number of high resolution photographs are taken, and then a team of visual rendering sort of experts, landscape architects, as well as folks that are highly skilled in this field, prepare the renderings depicting what the turbines will look like once overlaid on the background imagery. All of that is included in the construction and operations plan, which is on BOEM's website. And again, Jen, I'm happy to link to exactly where that can be found if there's additional interest there. And with that, minute and a half over, happy to take questions now or wait until the end. It's up to you how you'd like to.
Yeah, we're going to wait until the end.
Sure.
We want to make sure we have enough time for Megan. Thank you. That was great. Really appreciate all of that information. And yes, if you could send me directly the link to those visualizations, that would be wonderful. So if we get additional people who viewed this after it's posted on YouTube and they have questions, we can share that with them as well. So thank you, Catherine. With that, I'd like to introduce Megan Hayes. Megan is the permitting lead for the Atlantic Shores Project 3, or Atlantic Shores North, which is the lease area designated as OCS-A 0549. The Project 3 is approximately 8 miles off the coast of Ship Bottom, New Jersey. Megan has a Bachelor's of Arts in Marine Science from the University of California, Berkeley, and a master's in environmental management from Duke University. Megan has been working in environmental permitting for 10 years with experience working with environmental NGOs, private consulting, and for the public utility New York Power Authority before joining Atlantic Shores in 2022. So Megan, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us this evening to walk us through Atlantic Shores North and to give us some more information on the renewable energy that is being slated for development off of Jersey's coast. So with that, I will turn it over to you and for you to share your screen. I see you're already unmuted, so that's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Jen. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate being here with all of you. We've got 45 participants on the line, so I hope this is a great presentation for you all.
And I'm quite certain that there are many others who are going to be viewing this in recording. So we appreciate the opportunity to share this information.
Can you confirm that you're seeing my slide deck?
I am not.
That's unfortunate. How about now?
Wait, here it comes. There we go. Now I've got it.
Perfect. That's
wonderful.
fantastic.
Okay, all yours. Thanks, Megan.
All right, thank you so much. So again, my name is Megan Hayes, and I'm the permitting lead for Atlantic Shores North, or the Atlantic Shores Project 3. So that'll make sense when I show a map in just a moment. So in my role, I'm responsible for all permitting associated with the Northern Lease Area, which is designated OCSA 0549. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you tonight and to share some information about our planned offshore wind projects off the coast of New Jersey and New York. I'll start by giving a little background on Atlantic Shores and then move into a project overview and project updates. And we really hope to stress that our vision is to be the offshore wind developer of choice by delivering on our promises. As a company, at Atlantic Shores, we've adopted 4 core values that guide everything we do: safety, environmental responsibility, we lead with science, and we plan to be a good neighbor. I'll start with addressing safety. We believe that the health and safety of our employees, partners, contractors, and the communities belongs at the forefront of all of what we do. Environmental responsibility, we take a long-term and balanced approach to the shared use of our ocean, seeking to understand and mitigate any potential effects our projects may have on the environment, wildlife, and the industries that fuel our local economies. We are working very hard to be good neighbors. We value collaboration, coordination, respect for our neighbors, stakeholders, and in particular, other ocean users and our team members. And we work to lead with science. We prioritize a scientific, rational approach to project design, leveraging on-site surveys, expert studies, and assessments led by reputable third parties. Who are we? We are from the corporate side of things, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind is a 50-50 joint venture between Shell New Energies US and EDF Renewables. Pulling from those 4 core values, we are purpose-driven professionals dedicated to delivering potentially 5 gigawatts or more of offshore wind with our portfolio. We are strategically positioned to meet the growing demands of multiple East Coast markets, including New Jersey and New York. Earlier, when I introduced myself, I said I was the Atlantic Shores North permitting lead. So in this map, you see 3 lease areas in a bluish teal color. The darkest of them is the Atlantic Shores North lease area. That's the project area that I am the permitting lead for. So everything state, federal, and local associated with that project 3. Our portfolio has over 262,000 acres under development, under various stages of development. Right now, we only have 1 project that has been awarded. That project will start construction in 2024. And in 2027, we're expecting to deliver our first power to over 700,000 homes. Atlantic Shores North, and we'll touch on it a little bit more, has not yet been published on the BOEM website. We submitted our permits to BOEM in April of last year, and we are diligently waiting for that publication. And so today I will spend most of the discussion on our publicly accessible documents, which have to do with OCSA 0499, which is our Atlantic Shores South lease. All three of our leases are under various different stages of development. The Atlantic Shores South Construction and Operations Plan is available on the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM's website, and it details all of our development activities for those projects. As you can see in this image, there's actually two projects depicted in the blue and in the orange, with a little bit of an overlap area. Total, the entire lease area is planning to develop over 200 up to 200 wind turbines delivering power to shore. As mentioned, we expect to deliver that power in the mid-2020s. And these lease areas, it's important to note that they're proposed to be built near cities and towns with high electricity demand, so that we can generate reliable electricity while efficiently delivering to the places most in need. And the northern lease, as well as the Bite lease that we have, are covered under separate COPs that, when public, will also have the same development plans detailed. A little bit more about Project 1 versus Project 2. So Project 1 was awarded in June of 2021 by the New York Board of Public Utilities to a contract to deliver over 1510 megawatts or 1.5 gigawatts to New Jersey, which equates to powering over 700,000 homes. The Project 1 is located in the western 54,000 acres of the lease area. And Project 1 is expected to have up to 136 turbines. This project is currently under review by BOEM and is planned to begin producing power in 2027. The export cable corridor from the blue lease area travels and lands in Atlantic City, where then it travels completely underground to an existing Cardiff substation. And the Project 2 export cable corridor travels north to Seagirt. A little bit more information about Projects 1 and 2. What we have displayed here is a project timeline of how you can see our projects get developed off New Jersey's coast. We actually started the initial development and surveying offshore and surveying onshore, engineering and pre-development activities in 2018 when we first acquired the lease area. We've also been progressing commercial agreements and plan to construct an operations and maintenance facility. Once we receive our COP approval, which we're hoping for in 2023, fingers crossed, that will initiate the financing for the project, manufacturing, and the initiation of certain construction activities. Construction takes several years, and you phase it according to the environmental constraints that Catherine mentioned. Many of the constraints that affect Ocean Wind 1 will be affecting and will be integrated into our construction schedule to ensure that we are minimizing any impacts offshore and onshore. You'll note that the item in 2024 coastal transmission construction is happening in the off season, meaning it is not happening during a high tourism season. We start with HCD at the landfall and coastal transmission. Then we go to onshore transmission construction, offshore substation construction. We develop our export cable corridor. Then you'll see wind turbine and offshore substation foundations installed. We will be installing our inter-array cables, as well as our substations that will be ready for interconnection. Then our wind turbines will be installed and commissioned. Project 1 will be operational in 2027, as I mentioned, and Project 2 will be operational in 2028. Our wind turbine layout was determined through 3 different factors. First, through an evaluation of the existing traffic, including fishing and recreational users, and an alignment of our rows to allow for continued and safe navigation through our project areas. We drafted a navigational safety risk assessment, an assessment that evaluates project-related effects on any vessels that travel through the lease area. And through conversations with the U.S. Coast Guard, local commercial, surf clam, and recreational fishing communities. And Atlantic Shores is minimizing the impacts of its projects by locating all of our cable infrastructure underground, both offshore and onshore. Where possible, our routes follow existing roads, railroads, bike paths, and/or transmission line rights of way. This is really beneficial to our communities because it increases resiliency to storms. There will be, hopefully, no interference with fishing operations through our construction and operation, no danger from exposed cables, and having our lines underground eliminates impacts to birds from overhead lines. Our offshore cables will run 40 kilometers to Atlantic County and 138 kilometers to Monmouth County, and our cables will be buried 1.5 to 2 meters underground. Landfall sites for the export cables are Atlantic City and Seagirt. These areas will be where our generated energy from offshore will be brought onshore for the New Jersey communities, and they will be installed completely underground below any of our beaches. Lifespan and maintenance of our projects. The project 1 is designed to generate wind energy for up to 30 years. The lease includes a 25-year operating term, which may be extended in accordance with applicable regulations. All offshore facilities are designed to operate without on-site attendance from technicians to allow for swifter and more efficient management of the turbines, offshore substations, and associated equipment. We will be conducting regular maintenance and inspection of the facilities in accordance with regulatory requirements and industry best practices. And when possible, project components will be recycled or repurposed at the end of their useful lives. We take environmental responsibility very seriously at Atlantic Shores, and we have commitments we have commitments that we plan to adhere to. To evaluate our potential environmental impacts, Atlantic Shores consulted with federal and state agencies, environmental NGOs, local universities, local tribes, and many other stakeholders in developing our project design. We conducted over 35 environmental impact assessments to identify potential affected areas and the associated environmental protection measures. And we've designed our project around those environmental constraints. Fisheries and bird migration are certainly hot topics for our project. And we have initiated numerous studies on impacts to fisheries, and we are working directly with Rutgers and Stockton universities to analyze those findings. We have 2 fishery liaison officers to ensure that recreational and commercial and surf clan industries remain in touch with updates from our projects and in constant communication. In partnership with the New Jersey Wildlife Restoration Partnerships, Atlantic Shores is studying any impacts that the turbines will have on migration patterns of endangered red-knot bird species. We've done a tagging effort to understand their migration patterns. This is an example of the many studies that we've completed to better understand the project area. We've done everything from visual impact assessments, which I have some examples here, avian assessments, hydroacoustic modeling, marine mammal and sea turtle monitoring. We have a benthic monitoring plan and a benthic assessment report. We have an EMF report and a cable burial risk assessment. All of these studies are available on the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's website. They were filed with our COP. So these are in the form of appendices to our COP, and I'd be happy to share a link to those resources online. Similar to what Catherine shared, we do have visualizations. I have two sets of visualizations available today, one taken early morning and then one taken in the afternoon from two different key observation points. This key observation point is Beach Haven Historic District. And so there are several sheets that encompass a visual assessment from this location. This is the cover sheet, and it displays the vantage viewpoint from which the subject matter expert took photos, that those photos are then simulated with our proposed installation. So this is the existing condition. This is the actual, this is more of a realistic view. You can't really pan all the time. So this is a realistic view. And this is what our turbines and our project one will look like. Again, this is from the Atlantic Shore. This is from the Beach Haven Historic District, which as a reference point is the closest turbine is 13.5 miles from this location. So the cover sheet provides quite a bit of information about the simulations, and they're a great resource to look up. Our next simulation that I'll be sharing is from Lucy the Margate Elephant National Historic Landmark. The closest visible turbine from this viewpoint is proposed at 14.4 miles. And this simulation, the photo was taken at 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon on a very clear day. This is a before or existing condition. And this is what the proposed condition will look like. A very exciting project update for the Atlantic Shores South project team. On May 19th, BOEM published the Atlantic Shores South draft environmental impact statement, opening a 45-day comment period. That comment period will inform BOEM of how to best proceed with approving the two projects proposed by Atlantic Shores, projects 1 and 2. The comment period ends on July 3rd, 2023 at 11:59 p.m. Comments received during the DEIS comment period inform the preparation and publication of the final environmental impact statement that will ultimately inform the approval of the construction and operations plan. BOEM's approval of Atlantic Shores would result in the delivery of more than 2.5 gigawatts of renewable energy and associated environmental and economic benefits to the state of New Jersey. The purpose of the DEIS is for BOEM to assess the ongoing and planned actions that could occur during the life of the project and potentially contribute to cumulative impacts. The assessment includes reasonably foreseeable impacts on physical, biological, socioeconomic, and cultural resources that could result from the construction, installation, operations and maintenance, and the conceptual decommissioning of the proposed action. The DEIS is a major milestone in the process towards the federal approval of the project. It informs BOEM's decision on whether to approve with modifications, or disapprove the project's COP. Public input on the DEIS will inform the FEIS. The FEIS is then used to inform the record of decision when selecting a preferred alternative that may include modifications to the projects proposed in the COP. We have a series of meetings going this week and next week that I hope you all attend. We have in-person public hearings. We have 2 this week, and we have 2 virtual public meetings. Wanted to note that the registration is required to attend these meetings, and you can comment on our DEIS in 4 different ways. Written form by mail, in written form during the in-person hearings, through oral or written testimony during any of the public hearings, and then through regulations.gov web portal. If you search for docket number BOEM 2023-0030. Take one more moment there. So a lot of Catherine's presentation discussed the minimization and mitigation plans that are proposed for their project. The Atlantic Shores South COP is not yet at that phase, and so we look forward to the next ANJAC presentation where we'll be able to describe those commitments. And finally, I'm going to go over some of the benefits to New Jersey as proposed through Project One. And New Jersey is really pretty lucky to have ideal conditions for offshore wind with consistent, strong wind speeds off the coast. Wind energy from the Atlantic Shores Project One could help reduce New Jersey's net greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 3.9 tons annually, which is equivalent to 770,000 cars. We're investing in New Jersey's workforce and sparking research and innovation. We've issued grants to minority and women-owned businesses. We are partnering with union training. We're working with university research grants and environmental research funding. Some of the activities of Atlantic Shores in New Jersey include we are partnering with the EEW monopile facility in Paulsboro, New Jersey, the New Jersey Windport and Lower Alloways Creek. We plan to develop our operations and maintenance facility in Atlantic City, New Jersey. We have an onshore substation under parcel option right now in Egg Harbor Township. You'll see well, actually you won't see it. Our Project One cable landfall is in Atlantic City, and all that you will eventually see will be a hubcap, not a hubcap, basically a metal box flush on the ground that you can drive over within this existing parking lot. And finally, we are piloting a 10 megawatt hydrogen pilot project with South Jersey Industries. And Atlantic Shores is making a long-term commitment to New Jersey. We opened our doors on our Educational Community Outreach Center, which we call our Eco Center in Atlantic City. This space is an event and learning space for the local community to learn about offshore wind and our development plans. And in July of 2023, we launched an Offshore Wind for Kids program, a hands-on program with STEM activities to teach about offshore wind. And we hope to inspire kids to learn more about engineering and technology of our projects. And as I mentioned, we've proposed building an operations and maintenance facility in Atlantic City, which plans to employ 60 to 100 people. And that's the end of our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate that. And so we've got some great questions in the Q&A. So if you are able to stop sharing your screen and we can bring Catherine back on, we will get through as many of them as we can. We are going to wrap this up by 8:15. So I'm appreciative of you hanging with us. And if we don't get to your question or you think of something afterwards, again, please email us at info@anjac.org. So I am going to read the questions aloud, and then Catherine or Megan, whoever feels most comfortable answering, or if you want to bring in, phone a friend and bring in one of your colleagues, please feel free to do that. So first, let's ask, will commercial and private boat fishing be allowed within the boundaries of the wind farms?
I'll go first if that's Megan. I'll give your voice a little break. So at Ocean Wind 1, there won't be any prohibitions on fishing commercial or recreational within the wind farm once we're operational. During construction, we'll have limited safety zones around active construction sites, but otherwise no restrictions.
Great, thank you. Anything to add?
That's consistent for Atlantic Shores portfolio.
Wonderful, thank you. Now we have a construction question. So this can be for either of you. How many piles are driven per turbine? How long does it take to drive each pile into the ground? And how deep do they go into the ground?
I can start. So for Ocean Wind 1, our construction and operations plan evaluated two different options for our wind turbine foundations, a monopile foundation and a pin pile or jacket pile foundation. The project has selected the monopile foundation. It'll take roughly 4 hours to complete the pile driving of each individual monopile. So that's a single pile driven for each wind turbine, and they're driven approximately 230 feet deep into the seabed.
Great, thank you. Megan, anything to add to that?
So our project 1 has also selected monopiles, though our project 2 has not yet selected the foundation type, as we have not yet been awarded. That project definition will come at award. I also wanted to add that our offshore substations are proposed to be on pin pile foundations, as the substations have a larger platform and they need to be supported by more outstanding them. And so the pin piles are a structure of 4 pin piles down to actually a deeper penetration depth. And I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to skip around a little bit in the questions because you just said a keyword that someone asked about later on. The question is, what are substations and how are turbines monitored for any problems? What problems might typically need to be addressed? So Megan, since you said the magic word substations, maybe you can take that one first.
Not a problem. So a substation is essentially a hub for the electricity to be driven towards through the wires, and then they transmit through, similar to what you see in your communities. There are onshore substations all throughout our neighborhoods. The offshore substations are similar, but they will actually be quite a bit larger in the offshore space because we are generating quite a bit more power. So that's what a substation is. It's a hub. It's a utility box offshore. The other questions were, how are our projects going to be
How are turbines monitored? Yeah, and what problems might typically need to be addressed?
Right. So in our cables, we actually have quite a bit of technology bundled within the cable, and so that we can actively monitor the amount of power that is being generated. And if there's any fluctuations in that power, fluctuations in heat, or any information that would indicate a concern, we immediately know onshore and can send technicians out to those facilities. We can control our turbines through that technology as well. While there aren't any technicians on site outshore 24/7, there are those technicians onshore overseeing the project. And then the last item is what sorts of maintenance needs to be done. So there are very strict standards on maintenance in our operations of our wind turbine. And so hopefully we plan to repair and replace the technologies before any major failures or any sort of issues may come. And so there's a standard that is an international standard as well as national standards on those maintenance activities.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Again, I'm skipping around a little bit in the questions here, but let's stay on the ocean bottom and talk about the cable burial depth. The question is, what studies have been completed to determine that the cable burial depth is sufficient to withstand potential exposure from storm-induced currents, ship anchors, commercial fishing gear, etc. Maybe somebody could talk a little bit about the Marco mapping, because that was a pretty extensive effort that went on.
Maybe I'll take the first part of it, Jen. Okay. But so in terms of determining the appropriate nature of the burial depths that are identified, we do a handful of pretty serious assessments. So, and it's the cable burial depth is informed by, again, a handful of items. So the first is our cable, our CBRA cable burial risk assessment. So that's an independent third-party prepared document that's prepared on behalf of the project. It evaluates essentially all the potential hazards that could have an effect on the export cables and determines a threat line for those cables. So it's essentially looking at the penetration of any anchors that could potentially be dropped within the export cable areas using all possible information, and determines sort of a minimum burial depth. So that's the first piece. The second piece we look at is a seabed mobility and scour analysis that's conducted by a team of geophysical and geotechnical engineers who are responsible for really understanding all of the data that we collect during our offshore surveys, which define sort of natural rates of sediment mobility within the offshore space to understand sort of predicted rates of seabed change, again, informing what that burial depth really needs to look like. And so we pull that information together, as well as in addition to any sort of agency requirements looking at burial depths, and we define an appropriate burial depth under which the cable would not be subject to impacts from anchor strikes or snags from an entanglement from fishing gear.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Megan, would you like to add anything?
Just that cable burial depth is something that we take very seriously, and post-construction, we will be doing a survey to ensure that what we've installed is at the depth that we propose it to be installed at. And as I mentioned earlier, the bundling of cable and the bundling of technologies, we can determine the depth of burial from that technology to ensure that it doesn't shift in the sediment over time. It is true that the sands offshore shift. We have sand waves, mega sand waves, ripples, mega ripples. The sands do move. That's not disputable, but Atlantic Shores also does the cable burial risk assessments, scour, and other assessments that Catherine described to ensure that what we're installing will stay in place and is designed to stay in place.
That's great, thank you. And since I referenced the MARCO mapping, for anyone who's interested, MARCO stands for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean. And for more than a decade, there have been mapping efforts that have engaged communities, members of the fishery industry, members of the conservation industry, to really map what currently exists in our ocean. These are not the first cables that will be installed off of our ocean. There are a lot of IT cables that run up and down the Northeast corridor. And there are very significant MARCO maps for the New England and Mid-Atlantic region. And so you can look those up and view the shipping lanes, the fishery areas to the extent that they're known, the IT cable lines, the shellfish beds, et cetera, that are in our oceans as they exist right now. And that was a preliminary effort to identifying areas where wind energy could be developed. We needed to understand what was already happening in our oceans and map that so that we could have responsible placement of wind energy off of our shore. So we thank our environmental commissions and many others who engaged in that process to make sure that we can have the best available mapping. And so check that out at MARCO, again, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean. We are running out of time, but I do want to ask a general question that I think hits on several questions here, asking about the EIS and where can we find the EIS, where can we have access to it for, I think, any or all of the projects. So if you could review that again, where we can find this information, that would be helpful.
For Ocean Wind 1, BOEM publishes right to their website the draft EIS and the final EIS. So you can literally type into your browser Ocean Wind 1 FEIS and you'll be directed pretty easily to that page. But Jen, I'll send you separately links to the FEIS, the draft EIS, our construction and operations plan, and those visualizations, so you can share those with the
Awesome.
participants.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Megan?
The same is available for the Atlantic Shores South projects 1 and 2. We did just, the draft EIS was just published by BOEM on their website. The construction and operations plan, which was developed by Atlantic Shores with the many appendices of all of our environmental surveys, is also published on the BOEM website. It's one page with several different tabs that you can click through to download those documents.
Great. And if
I
you
can
can send me
provide
those links, what we'll
Absolutely.
do is when we post this on YouTube, we will post a comment as well so that you can have easy access to this information. So anybody who's viewing this tonight or will come in the future. I want to ask two more questions if we can just do these quickly. So we'll call this lightning round. Something that I know a lot of people have talked about and we talk about with storms getting more frequent and intense. How can the dangers of hurricane destruction be mitigated? And has that been incorporated into the construction planning for these turbines? And that's for both of you.
Real quick, it's in the project and the ratepayers and everyone's interest that we, maintain and build these projects to withstand any hurricane events. So it's something that's incredibly important to our project. So to that fact, we design the turbines to adhere to international standards, and then they're independently reviewed. The design is independently reviewed by a certification verification agent. So it's a third party that BOEM hires to review all of our design specifications to ensure that they do withstand hurricane force winds.
Great, thank you. Megan, anything else to add?
Same for Atlantic Shores. We're held to the exact same standards in the same process.
Great, thank you. And one last question, and maybe we'll start with Megan because you've got a lot of meetings starting tomorrow, I think. What are the best ways for local environmental commissions to support your projects and wind power in general?
Well, we would love it if you'd show up to those meetings. We would love it if you'd show up to the online virtual hearings and issue a comment letter. If you need comment letter support, we'd love to help you with that. We do our best to build relationships with the communities of which our transmission routes and our projects may travel through, but there's always more that we can do. And so we'd love it if we could work with you to learn more about what sorts of resources you may need to help share the story of what we're trying to do. We're addressing climate change, and we have pretty big commitments that we're looking to live out. There, just within New Jersey, that's 9 gigawatts by 2025, I believe. Might have gotten that wrong. But we're trying to meet the presidential commitment, which is 30 gigawatts by 2030. So it's a lot to do in a very little amount of time, and we need everyone from grass tops to grassroots.
Thank you. Catherine, would you like to add anything?
We're also looking for any, we're looking to engage with folks as much as we can as well. So upcoming opportunities for public participation are slightly more limited as we're as we're nearing the end of our public approval process. But if folks have questions, we'll be implementing sort of a great big stakeholder outreach team to address any questions as they come up during the construction phase of the project. And that's also something I think, Jen, it would be great if there's interest. We'd be happy to come back and provide an update on the project as we progress into the next phase, which is just here on the horizon.
Thank you. And Anjak will be sharing our comments as well and our talking points ahead of at least the virtual hearing. So we know there's some in-person hearings this week, virtual hearings next week for the Atlantic Shores project. And we look forward to continuing to work with you, Catherine, and your colleagues at Orsted. And the the shift to renewable, clean, renewable energy could not be more important as we see the increasing impacts of the climate crisis on New Jersey. It is a global problem, but New Jersey is experiencing the effects of climate change more intensely than any other state in terms of temperature and the impact of storms. So we're pleased to be part of the solution, and we want to engage environmental commissioners in being part of the solution as well. So thank you for, again, spending time with us tonight and bringing us a lot of science, a lot of data. We really appreciate getting the information right from the source. Sorry to those who we did not get to answer your question tonight. We just simply ran out of time. We could clearly spend lots of time talking about this. We invite you to tune into our YouTube sessions and learn more. And if we didn't get to your question and you really need to know the answer, please do email us at info@anjac.org and we'll get that answer to you. So with that, happy last evening of spring. There's still a little bit of daylight out there for you. So enjoy, and happy summer solstice, which begins just before 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. So have a good evening, and we'll see you soon. Thank you again. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.